There's a question that China's intelligence apparatus has been asking for the past 36 hours, one that no Western outlet has yet framed correctly. And the answer to that question is more frightening for Beijing than anything that has happened to Iran. The question is this: we gave them everything. We gave them real-time aircraft tracking data. We gave them anti-stealth radar systems. We gave them the specific flight paths of every Israeli F-35 that took off from Tel Aviv. We watched those aircraft cross Iraq in real time and transmitted their position, speed, and altitude to Iranian military commanders. The flight time from Tel Aviv to Tehran is 2.5 hours. We gave Iran 2.5 hours of warning. And Khamenei still died in his compound on a Saturday morning, with 40 of his most senior commanders sitting beside him. So who stopped that warning from reaching him? Beijing's bewilderment. China's UN ambassador Fu Kong called the U.S.-Israeli strikes brazen, condemning the threat of force and calling for respect for Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. He described the attacks as coming in the middle of diplomatic negotiations. Shocking. China's ambassador to the United Nations used that exact word on the floor of the Security Council. It is not diplomatic language. It is genuine bewilderment. Beijing had provided Iran with anti-stealth radar systems capable of detecting F-35s, real-time satellite intelligence, live aircraft tracking data as Israeli jets crossed Iraqi airspace, and none of it saved Khamenei, because the intelligence China gave Iran reached the people who were supposed to act on it, and someone in that chain decided not to act on it, or decided to ensure that Khamenei would still be sitting in that compound when the Israeli F-35s arrived 2.5 hours after Beijing first saw them take off. Moscow's loaded phrase. President Vladimir Putin described Khamenei's killing as a cynical murder that violated all standards of human morality and international law. He added that Khamenei would be remembered in Russia as an outstanding statesman who brought Russian-Iranian relations to the level of a comprehensive strategic partnership. Russia's UN envoy Vasily Nebenzia chose a specific phrase on the Security Council floor: a betrayal of diplomacy. Not military aggression, not an act of war, a betrayal of diplomacy. That framing is deliberate. Russia has spent 3 years watching its own diplomatic communications, and military planning appear in Western press reports with suspicious regularity. Putin's dismissals of senior military commanders, his purge of FSB officers, his increasingly restricted inner circle, all of it reflects the same institutional paranoia that China is now experiencing as it reviews every intelligence channel it opened with Iran over the past 8 months. Consider what Russia gave Iran: Verba manpads, man-portable air defense systems, technology to keep IRGC missile systems functional despite American jamming. America's complete war plan leaked to Tehran, and despite every intelligence advantage, every weapon system, every technological upgrade that both Russia and China spent 8 months delivering, Khamenei is dead. 40 senior commanders died in 2 locations within a single minute. The pattern that explains everything. A clear pattern has emerged across every major Israeli intelligence success of the past decade. Understanding it makes the China-Russia silence operationally coherent. In each case, Soleimani in Baghdad, Nasrallah in Beirut, Haniyeh in Tehran, and now Khamenei in his own compound. The Israeli and American operation succeeded not because their surveillance technology was superior to Iran's security protocols, but because someone who knew the target's location, his schedule, or meeting details chose to transmit that information at the critical moment. In each case, the operation required an insider. The insider was sufficiently senior to have genuine access to the target. Iran's security establishment spent subsequent weeks unable to identify the betrayer, because they were embedded too deeply within the institution. The question Moscow and Beijing are asking in their emergency review meetings is the same. If the people we armed, informed, and equipped could be penetrated so completely that 40 commanders could be killed in 1 minute, what does that tell us about our own security? Iran on death ground. Sun Tzu's Art of War, the Chinese military text studied by every officer in the People's Liberation Army, defines death ground as the terrain where retreat is impossible and destruction is the only alternative to total commitment. A force on death ground fights with a ferocity that cannot be sustained but cannot be predicted. Iran is now on death ground. The Iranian government has announced 40 days of mourning. A new IRGC commander was appointed within 24 hours. 6 waves of retaliation have been launched against 27 American bases. The Fatah II hypersonic missile was used in combat for the first time. The Strait of Hormuz has been conditionally closed, with 150 ships stalled outside the waterway. A tanker in the strait has been attacked with Iranian crew on board. President Masoud Pezeshkian described the supreme leader's killing as an open declaration of war against Muslims, particularly the Shia. He called it the greatest trial facing the Islamic world today. China's silence is partly the silence of a country that built an ally's defenses and watched them fail. But it is also the silence of a country calculating whether Iran's total commitment to revenge is consuming assets China built and needs. 3 Americans dead. Trump agrees to talk. 3 American service members were killed and 5 wounded in Iran's retaliatory operations against American bases. CENTCOM confirmed this 36 hours after initially reporting no casualties. 3 American soldiers are dead in a war that was launched without congressional authorization for the use of military force, based on an ICBM claim that Trump's own intelligence officials told Reuters was unsupported, against a country that was in active diplomatic negotiations with American envoys as recently as Thursday. Then came Trump's statement to The Atlantic on Sunday morning. While Iranian missiles were still landing in Bahrain and Kuwait and Tel Aviv, "They want to talk and I have agreed to talk, so I will be talking to them. They should have done it sooner. They waited too long." The 5 Geneva demands, structurally impossible for Iran to accept, described by an Iranian official as designed to be rejected, apparently remain negotiable. The talks that Trump's own advisors told Axios had a 90% chance of producing military action have now been replaced by an agreement to talk to the government currently striking 27 American bases and mining the Strait of Hormuz, on a timeline Trump cannot specify, through channels that do not yet exist. The Gulf's silent calculation. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, the UAE, Jordan, governments whose territory was struck by Iranian missiles because American jets took off from their soil, are publicly condemning Iran's retaliation while staying silent about the American operation that triggered it. That silence is not support. It is the silence of governments that cannot publicly oppose their security guarantor while privately concluding that their security guarantor's operation produced exactly the outcome they spent weeks trying to prevent. The same governments that pre-positioned emergency oil supplies 3 weeks ago because they knew the strike was coming and wanted to minimize economic damage are now watching Jebel Ali port burn, Kuwait's airport terminal disabled, Qatar's early warning radar destroyed, and Bahrain's 5th Fleet headquarters struck. Not a single Patriot battery, not a single THAAD system. None of the American defense architecture these governments paid hundreds of billions of dollars to acquire and maintain stopped a single Iranian wave. The GCC foreign ministers are convening an emergency video conference, not to coordinate support for Operation Epic Fury, but to determine what their collective position is on a conflict that has put their cities, their ports, their airports, and their economies in the crossfire of a war they were never consulted about. The question that has no answer yet. China and Russia are sitting in emergency intelligence review meetings this Sunday morning asking one question that neither can answer with certainty. If the person who brought Khamenei out of his bunker and into that compound knew what was coming, and someone clearly did, then how deep does the penetration go? Until Beijing and Moscow can answer that question, every piece of intelligence they share with Iran's new leadership is potentially intelligence they are sharing with the CIA. The 2 countries that built Iran's defensive architecture are now conducting emergency reviews of every system they provided, not to upgrade it, but to determine whether it was compromised from the inside before the first bomb fell. This is what China and Russia are watching from the silence of their review meetings, not a decisive American victory that reshapes the Middle East, not a regime change operation that produced the phone call Trump joked about on Saturday night, a bombing campaign that killed 40 Iranian commanders in 1 minute, killed the supreme leader, killed his daughter and grandson, and produced an agreement to talk to the surviving government on a timeline that Trump cannot specify. The answer will not be found in any missile trajectory, any stock market reaction, or any presidential social media post. It will be found in what Iran's streets do over the next 40 days of mourning. China gave Iran 2.5 hours of warning. Khamenei still died.